Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're watching this from in the world, and welcome to what will be the third and final video I'll be making about my trip to Mexico in February of 2023. Some of you may be here because you watched Volume 1 and Volume 2 about Mexico City and Oaxaca. I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope you enjoy this one too. If you haven't seen those videos and you just stumbled across this one because you typed in Tulum, then if you do enjoy this, then I recommend you go and check those other videos out. They're on my channel. Before I take us from Oaxaca to Tulum, I just want to point out again that this is not travel advice. I don't actually believe in advice. This is a story about me and my experience and what I saw and how I felt in Tulum and Valladolid. The aim of these videos is to tell a story, the story of me in the place that I visit, how I interpret it. It's never to tell people what they should and shouldn't do, particularly as a foreigner in another country. But I hope that also it shows you the beauty of the world and maybe inspires you in some way to get out there and experience it for yourself. So let's not waste any more time and head to Tulum. Oh man, the first thing I want to say is that there was a big change in energy when I landed in Tulum. As I came out of the airport, I was hit by an army of resort reps and taxi drivers. Standing on the edge of Margaritaville, I waited for my ride to arrive whilst watching the chaos unfold. As people bartered with taxi drivers to find the best price or hunted for a board which had their name written on it. After an hour or so of refusing lifts, my driver arrived and I jumped in and we headed to Tulum. I was staying at a place called Cielito Hotel, which was in the center of Tulum, rather than on the coast. Having been in Mexico City and Oaxaca, naturally the coastline was going to be a big attraction for me. Getting down to the shore was quite a walk, so I decided for the first time in my life to rent a scooter. Gracias. I drove past many bars and restaurants and resort entrances that all looked incredible, but I wasn't there for that. I followed the road along the coast and the resorts for quite a while, and then I drove up to what seemed to look like a checkpoint. After speaking to the guards on the gate, they told me that it was a nature reserve. So this nature reserve was essentially a road surrounded by totally inaccessible jungle left and right. When I came across an opening in the jungle that took me to a public beach, I noticed something: the seaweed. There was a lot. When you look up pictures of Mexico or Mexican resorts in Tulum, it's not something that you generally see, I don't think, on the internet. And it made me wonder, do the resorts clear away the seaweed on the beach and essentially push it down the shoreline to public places like the one that I was at? There was absolutely one thing I knew I wanted to do when I was in this part of Mexico, and that was to visit some cenotes. These are wonderful natural landforms that I believe are underwater cave pools that have collapsed in and formed an open air pool. The first one I visited was called Cenote Sazila. It was small, but still beautifully clear and not busy at all. I met a German man who was happy to provide me with some footage of him diving in, and a Mexican boy that was learning to dive for the first time. I spent about an hour and a half there swimming and diving in, but my new German friend was bringing out my competitive side, and after a few failed backflips, it was time to go. The second cenotes I visited was very different. It was a little tricky to find and down some very dusty roads. There was no shop, no bar, no real infrastructure that I could see, just a car park and a shack and a few men that worked there that sold tours. I paid 600 pesos for a tour. I grabbed a snorkel mask and some flippers and jumped in. One of my biggest regrets with this whole trip is not having a camera I could take underwater, because, I mean, you're sitting there listening to me talk about an experience which was magical, but I literally got no footage. All I've got are the pictures that the tour guide took, and bless him, he was working with the best that he had. The camera I used to make these is a GH6, and I mean, I just shudder at the thought of getting it anywhere near water. One thing I do have to tell you though, and one thing that made this cenote particularly special and particularly unique. Ducking under the mangroves and navigating through the caves, we reached the end of the cenote. And there, 20 feet in front of me, chilling on the reeds, was what my tour guide described as a friendly crocodile. Now, it's one thing observing one of nature's apex predators from the shorelines or the safety of a boat, but it's a very different experience coming across one after having swum 200 meters in flippers and a snorkel, which, due to a lack of my own experience, was at times already a fight for my life. I saw the crocodile, I wished him a pleasant day, and I headed back to the shoreline. I saw a lot of what I was expecting in Tulum: cocktail bars, nightclubs, live music, everything that comes with a demographic that were largely there to party. It's a fascinating place, and I'm sure you could write an entire socio-economic book about it, but I'm going to leave that to the professionals, or at least the people that weren't there for only 4 days. I decided that a city inland would be my next destination, a place called Valladolid. Valladolid is a small city an hour inland from Tulum. Of all the places I've stayed in Mexico, this was absolutely one of my favorite. The man that ran this guest house actually built it with the help of his 3 brothers. He told me that he had been a taxi driver and a salesman in Valladolid for many years, saved up enough money to start this project. When the guest house was full, he would sleep outside in a hut, and every morning he would invite me to sit with him for bread and coffee. The difference between our living conditions was stark, but he really seemed to enjoy sharing food and company with his guests. He would drive me to town each day and stop and say hello to his neighbors along the way, and on many occasions offer them a lift. On one of those occasions, I turned to him and I said, "Nunca dejaste de ser taxista," which meant you never stopped being a taxi driver. The center of Valladolid was beautiful, colorful, and in many ways reminded me of Oaxaca.
Barbershop and transformation de Valladolid.
Whilst I was in Valladolid, I decided to visit one more cenote. This one was quite dark due to the fact that the hole was so deep, and it had wonderful long plants coming down the side. Unfortunately, when I arrived, my battery was about to die, but I had just enough to capture the scale of the place and also the atmosphere. I swam staring at the sky, admiring the vines around the edges and occasionally trying to touch the little black fish that were swimming around me, as well as cheering with the rest of the crowd every time someone overcame their fear and plucked up enough courage to jump in off of the platform. I knew my time in Mexico was coming to a close, and before I headed back to Cancun to catch a flight to the UK, there was one more place on my list to go, and that was a place called Chichen Itza. I took a collective vote out of town and made a few friends along the way. Chichen Itza was very different to Teotihuacan. The temple in the middle was an attraction that clearly drew a lot of the crowd, but as I walked through, I came across what looked like a sports field. A long corridor with walls either side, about 20-30 feet high. The walls in this arena depicted a blood sport, and one of the carvings was of a man holding the severed head of his opponent. Almost every wall in the area was covered in one form of symbolism or another, and there's something very spiritual about staring at a 1500-year-old carving of a skull. I walked around the site enjoying the architecture and taking more video of lizards, bought a souvenir to go on my parents' fridge, and then jumped in an Uber to head back to Valladolid. I was approaching the end of my time in Mexico, but before I got on an ADO to take me to Cancun, I went to town to enjoy a moment on Las Sillas Confidentes. These were public chairs that had been designed for two people to sit and face each other and talk. Chairs that could only exist in a country that seems to pride itself on its community, kindness and love. And I can't think of a more fitting way to wrap up my time in Mexico. So I have no idea why I did it in an alley in Cancun.
What's going on, everyone? This is Gerard, AutoCigars.com. Today we're gonna have 3 easy steps on how to smoke your first cigar ever. Therefore, you're not gonna be intimidated in front of your friends or at a cigar lounge around many other men.
I think I could get into this. Although I don't smoke, this does feel like a good end to what has been an unbelievable 3 weeks. And I'm immensely proud of myself for coming and doing this alone. I've learned a whole lot about myself, but I'm also hugely, hugely grateful for the love, openness, and hospitality that I've been shown by everybody in this country. Even the people that I've only met for a few minutes. I mean, there's still time for me to get mugged. The statistics tell me that this is the part of the video where you sense the end is near and start to think about maybe what else you can watch. But before you do, if you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I would love to bring you more stories, more adventures, more cinematography, and your support allows me to do that. The last thing to do is thank you. Thank you for supporting me and watching these stories. I hope you've enjoyed them. I can't tell you what happens next because I just don't know. But what I do know is that I would love to be sitting here talking to you all again soon. So until then, the only thing left to say is look after yourselves and thank you for watching.